Hi, this is Robert Leiterman with the Bluff Creek Project. And today for our podcast, we're interviewing Rob Collier. Now, Rob's a pretty interesting guy. I met him on an expedition many moons ago. I think it was one of the BFRO expeditions. And it was, it's actually when you had a sighting, a thermal sighting with about five other individuals at a place called Dry Lake. And that's where we first met that expedition. Is my memory serving me correctly?
Well, your memory serves you correctly.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Because I don't think we did. That was like a Saturday night. So we went to the film site, I think Saturday, and then Sunday was like go home time. But you guys went on a little mini thing out and about at night, and then you guys were out Leiterman, and some crazy happened. But before we go there, yeah, if you don't mind sharing with our listeners a little about yourself.
Well, I'm originally from Southern California. Growing up, I was raised going to the outdoors. For my family trips, my mom and dad would take my sister and I. We were always in the Sierra Nevada mountains. So I grew up in the mountains. I grew up fishing. I grew up hiking. I grew up hunting, and that kind of thing. My professional background, I work in law enforcement here in Southern California, and retiring soon, thankfully. I do have that background of, I think, with doing research in the Bigfoot community or Bigfooting or whatever you want to call it. I think my investigative background helps me with that. So I have to give kudos to the law enforcement side of that. That has helped me to look at things differently in life, and then especially when I'm in the field. Let's see. That's about it for my background. I mean, kid from Southern California, grew up in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and I love them.
So how in the world does a law enforcement officer in one of the busiest cities on the West Coast, how does a person like yourself get involved with investigating or getting involved with looking for a fictitious mythical creature called Bigfoot?
Well, that's an interesting question. So growing up, as we all have, watching, Legend of Boggy Creek, and Leonard Nimoy, In Search of, and all those shows that came on during that time, you grew up with that thought of what if, is there this, I remember growing up as a kid and watching these shows, and Boggy Creek scared the dickens out of me. But I remember watching that and go, is there something, even though that was a show, a movie, and then, you start to, your mind starts to race and you start to think, and then going up to the mountains and then your mind starts running wild. And then watching those in-depth, shows like In Search of with Leonard Nimoy or, and then, everybody knows about the, 1967 Patterson Gimlin film. And that really, I remember watching that as a kid and watching that on TV, and that really sparked my interest. What really got me into Bigfooting, and when I was a kid, I used to spend a lot of time up in Central California with my dad's side of the family, and I have a cousin. His name is Jeff, and he's a hunter, tracker, excellent outdoorsman. And when I'd go up there, through my teens, he told me two stories that really, really sparked my interest. He had, and I might be wrong on the years, but it was late 80s and the early 90s that he had two encounters, which he believes two encounters, up in the area near actually Strawberry, California, and while he was hunting. And that really sparked my interest. That really got me thinking as I was older, getting older up there and, being a 16, 17, 18 years old. And I always, when I was out in the woods and I used to go hunting with my cousin, I would always look around and go, I wonder if there's a Bigfoot out here, or do they exist? Still kind of, you're still kind of on the fence about some things, but that's what got me interested in it. And I've always watched it. And then of course, let's fast forward to, 2010, and, the Finding Bigfoot show was on. And that was the first real show that did anything, on Bigfoot. And so, coupled with that desire and that drive inside, what ifs and reading books and remembering what my cousin had told me from his encounters, and then, finding Bigfoot. And then I took the leap and, I attended my first BFRO expedition back in 2011.
Man, you've been a busy guy. I can tell you that now. Because after you drank the punch or took the red pill,
right,
and you got involved with this, you've been actually busy. Because let's talk about that first expedition, because it's pretty interesting. Because I think it was July of 2011. I think it was Bill Brewer was leading that, correct? If my memory serves me right.
No, that was Brandon Doyle.
Brandon. Okay. Brandon. So Bill was helping out. I was helping out back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were. That's where you and I met. Yes.
Yeah. We did a bunch of stuff, and I took you to the film site. We went to the film site, and we had a guy that was overweight, and he went to the film site.
Well, that's it. I did. When you took a group to the film site, I did not go that day.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was an adventure in itself, but it was interesting that the gentleman that we got in there, because it's a public place, you can't tell. It's a public place. You can't tell people you can't go. As much as you can advise them and say, you're overweight, you're not in good shape, it might be a hazard, but you can't say absolutely no. It's a public place.
Right.
So the gentleman still wanted to go, and so he went. He made it all the way there, and then when he got down to the base of the area there, then I think Roddy Kelly escorted him back out, but him and his wife made it that far. And I met the guy a couple of years later, and he had lost about 100 pounds.
Wow.
And he said that trip that he took down to the film site, which he didn't quite make it, he made it down towards where the Peter Byrne location was. He said it changed his life forever, and he changed a lot of things in his life. But that was that Saturday. And then that Saturday night is when you guys went out. It was like the last big thing on the BFR expedition towards Dry Lakes, the last big Yahoo to go do something. And you guys went out. Did you guys go out on foot? I mean, you drove to a place and you guys parked?
Yeah, we drove to I believe it was Dry Lake, and we positioned, there was 3 or 4 cars there, and we positioned our cars back up against the hillside where they were off the road. And that's when there was 2 guys down at Dry Lake. They were call blasting, flute music, Native American flute music. And then the rest of us was myself and Brandon and 4 other gentlemen. We decided to walk Dry Lake Road and just walk and work at that. You know what I mean? And that was all new to me, even though it was just my 3rd night. I tell you, you're out in the woods, it's dark. We did have a little bit of moonlight, what I remember from that evening. But this was all new to me, and it was a new place. And I tell you, it was spooky at times, but we just worked the road that night, and things transpired about, I think we were about 1.5 miles up the road. I think what Brandon said.
Yeah.
And I remember as we worked the road, it was a quiet evening that night. There was not much. You could hear the flute music off in the distance, but as we got farther and farther away, it faded. And I learned this. So every time, when you leave the car, I left a recorder on the truck that I came in. And I drove in a truck with a friend of mine named Tim Blackers. And I left my recorder on his right front tire. For anybody out there, if you're going to do audio recording after parking a car, do not leave it on the tire of a car, because your car or truck will cool down and you got a bunch of pinging noises on your audio, so you can hear the car. So that was a lesson learned. But I left that. Now I'll get back to that, why that is so important. Okay. Anyway, as we were up the road, we couldn't hear the call blast anymore. We were pretty far away. And I remember getting to a point on the road, and it was like a vista. And I was looking over the valley, and we had the moonlight, and it wasn't a full moon for it, but we had a little bit of moonlight, but it was just beautiful. And I was the first one actually up to the vista. And I had a 3rd generation night vision goggle that belonged to my friend Tim. And that was a whole new world to me. And I remember standing up over this vista, and I guess I was like one of the first ones to get up there. And then a couple other people walked up. But we had a guy in the group named Ron, and I won't give him his last name because he's a private individual.
Yeah.
But Ron had a thermal camera, and we only had one in that group. We didn't have like we have nowadays. You know, when we go out on trail, there's a plethora of thermal cameras now. Back then, they were so expensive, not everybody could afford them. But Ron was coming up the road, and he alerted everybody because they were kind of standing right where I was, and Brandon was there, and he kind of alerted. He goes, "Oh, something big just walked up across the road in front of him." Brandon, you know, being Brandon was, you know, trying to be a good leader. And he's like, "Okay, what was it, a bear, mountain lion?" He's like, "No, it was on 2 feet." And I'm looking at it. And he says, "It's sitting to the right side of the road. Now it's squatted down."
Yeah.
And I went, "What?" So I took my night vision. So when you're looking at, you know, it was good night vision back then, that 3rd gen. I mean, look at, everything's bright as day, but everything's dark, right? There's no thermal signature in night vision.
Right.
So I'm looking at this dark object, and I think from the video you and I did on that, right?
Yes.
I don't know, we were 70, 80 yards away or something like that in that realm. But, you know, I've just seen a black mass at that distance, and, you know, it's a little weird looking through that at that distance. So as Ron continued to look through it, Brandon grabbed, was given the thermal camera and was looking at where Ron was looking, and there was a pause. It was quiet. And all of a sudden, Brandon starts going, start dropping the F word. Oh, and he goes, "Oh, yeah. Oh. And he says, it's a Bigfoot. It's sitting on the side of the road." And we are all elated. We're like, "What?" We passed around the camera. When I got it, I saw I saw a huge mass with a conical shaped head. And what I remember just from being from that distance, how massive it was sitting on it. It was brighter than anything else around it. Now, we had sunshine that day. It wasn't a cloudy day. So you're thinking, okay, rocks absorb heat, trees absorb heat, everything around it. But this had the outline of that classic conical shaped head, the broad shoulders. And what I remember as it got down to where the butt or how it was squatting, it was the sides were like, looked fat, looked big. It was sitting there. But what I remember too, it was astonishing to me. It was moving left to right. It was like what gorillas do when observed or monkeys, when they turn their back to you, they'll sit there and fidget, or they'll rock back and forth. I've seen that. I have a friend of mine who has a spider monkey. I go visit him and his monkey sometimes, and I interact with her. She does the same thing in the classic when they don't want to look you in the eyes. They turn their body to hide, and they sit there and they'll look back at you and they'll rock a little bit. This thing was doing the same thing. And at one time when I was looking through the camera, it did turn back and look at me, and I could see it was gray in the face. The thermal imaging, or that thermal hit in the face, it was gray. There was some heat there, but it wasn't bright white. It was gray. And then it turned away, and that's when it just blew my mind. And it would sit there and just rock back and forth. So Brandon and I, at one time, we started moving forward towards it. We didn't go very far, maybe 20 feet closer, if that. And then Brandon didn't want to push it. He didn't want to upset it. But as we're standing there, we had an embankment to our right. And this thing was hugging that right side of the road pretty good. And an embankment went up. It was a pretty tall embankment. Can't remember how tall it was, but I would have had a problem climbing up it. It wasn't, 4 or 5 feet. It was taller than that. But we had something stomping and walking back and forth above our location between us and the Bigfoot we were looking at.
You guys heard that?
Yeah, we heard that. I heard it. The crunching, the stomping. It was like pacing, then it would stop. I believe there was another one up there waiting for this one. And what I think we did, we were downwind. This one was coming up over the ridge onto the road. And I think we all met at the same time. It got caught out in the open. It did the classic turn, hide its back, like primates do, or gorillas do. And it just sat on the side of the road. And it was, I still remember that today. It's very vivid in my mind. I'll never forget that. And we had a gentleman in the group who came from the UK to this expedition. And I tell you about, he said he got his money worth because he saw it too. And he was just blown away. So that was really cool. And so anyway, we watched it for a while. And then Brandon said, look, he said, hey, I'm going to stay here with the camera. You guys walk down the road back towards the truck, keep walking that way. And he goes, I'm going to stay up here and see what it does. So we all did that. Brandon stayed up there for a few minutes. We were down around the road, down around the corner from him. We didn't walk too far from him, maybe 50, 60, 70 yards, maybe that. We got out, basically out of line of sight. And Brandon came walking back a few minutes later. And he's like, hey, man, he goes, when you guys were walking away, it turned its body and it was watching all of you walk away. Because Brandon was huddled kind of close to the right side of the road. I think he was trying to hide himself a little bit while he's working the camera, the thermal camera. And he says, yeah, it turned when you guys started walking down. It fully turned. Watch you guys walk back down the road.
And that was your first. That was your first sighting, right?
That was my first sighting, first expedition, and that's you know, Robert. I was on the fence whether these creatures existed or not, because growing up, as I told you before at the beginning of this, you hear about other, I did hear about sightings and other stories, and I was doing my reading, and you start to think, you go, there's no way that all these people are having all these sightings and these things it just don't exist, because you have some very good people out there. People are very good at from all backgrounds, truck drivers, hauling. You got cops having, nightly crossings in front of their police cars. You have people from all demographics are seeing these things. So after that moment, when that happened to me, in my mind, I'm like, there's no way. There's just no way. And then I felt it was such a surreal moment. And I believe, well, after that, we all went back down to the cars, and I retrieved my recorder, and we all went back. I had some great audio on that too, from that evening. But I remember that night back at camp, I think we ran into you in your group, and I think Brandon told you about it or something.
Yeah. You guys were excited. You guys were pretty elated when you got back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that was the talk of the expedition, and wow, I like I said, I still remember that very vividly today.
I remember that. Because after you told us, everybody was like leaving. So the next day was Sunday, and we all have windows to leave by. So we go, well, let's go back up there. And we were able to get 5 of you guys back up there. Mm-hmm. And then we interviewed you from the position. Each person got interviewed, gave what they remember, what was going on. And I remember you were interviewed and taking you back to the same place and interviewing you and having you go recap how it went. And then we did a little investigation. So we went over looking for stuff. We didn't find much, actually. And then we did a recreation of trying to determine where it might have been standing. Like we had, my memory goes bad, but Bill Brewer was down at the very end. He had his tarp out, or his rain parka. He was holding it up. Yeah.
He was, you guys remember, I remember after that, you asked for us to come back there, or whoever went. It was myself, Ray Lopez, Tim Blackhurst, can't remember. I don't know the gentleman from the UK. I don't think he went. I believe Ron went back, and that's how I can remember. Then we tried to go over the recreation of it. And you were obviously had a video camera, and Bill was playing the part of where the Bigfoot was. You guys were trying to do the measurements, or we did obtain the measurements for height, width, and the positioning of it. I remember going through all of that. So, and
now going through all that stuff after the fact, did that make you second guess anything you've seen the night before, or did that just reaffirm everything you?
No, it reaffirmed. I have never second guessed myself on that sighting. Now I've had other, now here we fast forward 11 years later, I've been doing this for a while, and you think you see something, and my thing is you debunk it before you say it is. Yeah. And so, but for that first sighting, I know what I saw. I saw the movement. I saw what it did. And when I looked at the thermal camera, it turning its body or neck area, what neck they have. The face, I can still see that today. And then the rocking back and forth motion, I can still see that in my mind.
Yeah, I got a question on the thermal. Now, I'm not really good with thermals, but I know people who really are good with thermals. And when you look through it,
yeah,
there's sinus cavities, and they show up differently than the rest of the skin. The eye sockets, if you're wearing glasses, so it doesn't go through eye. Did you see that? Like, when you look through it, you almost see like an X across the face because all the sinus cavities and the eye sockets. And
I think that's what I mean by the different, when it turned in its face and I saw that gray versus, okay, I'm looking at the body and I can see it. It's white hot, right? It's lit up like a Christmas tree if you want to put it in that tag. But it's glowing white hot. And then when it turned and its face was shown, it was a darker heat residual. It wasn't as dark as the back, what we were looking at. Face had a different, and you're right. From now, I was at distance, but the face was darker, even though it was emitting heat. It wasn't as hot as the back.
Yep.
Therefore, it was putting off it wasn't white hot. It was more, I think, a deeper tone type heat signature, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, like facial hair will keep our face warm.
Yeah.
Exposed areas will cool off faster.
Cool. Yeah.
And like people's noses are always like dark, right? Because they're the last thing sticking out.
I just remember that gray around the cheek area from that distance. And now thinking back, that now the eyes were, you couldn't see that, but that little bit of that forehead and that cheek area, that was very gray, sticks in my mind. And I saw that and it's still there.
So that's just the cooler part of the face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exposed tissue.
It's kind of funny. I do have that camera to this day. I have the original camera that I did had my first sighting with.
It's one of the old ones. It's ones where it keeps changing on you and it's not as clear. Yeah. Yeah.
It's I don't know, something like a X something P or 200 or I don't know. I have it. I can look at it.
Yeah. It's that part's not too
important. It doesn't work anymore. But yeah, it was. That's kind of a nostalgia kind of
oh yeah,
something I have. So.
Yeah, I can imagine having your first sighting and then keeping your underwear from that. Of course, after you clean it, of course, but
but getting back to like when we went back and did the recreation with you guys, you and Bill, and getting the distance and doing all that and looking at it during the day, I have never. Getting back to that question, I've never had a doubt. I mean, that just when Bill was up there with his, and everybody could see that video online now. When Bill getting up there with his tarp or his blanket and kind of we're situating everything, and then getting up close to where we thought it was sitting. That it just reaffirmed what I saw the previous evening.
Yeah, originally we thought it was sitting by the berm, but no, that didn't match the location. It was farther, closer towards where you guys were, but proximal to you, distal to whatever.
Right.
And it was on the shoulder of the road, and there's always critics. You always run into critics. There's always people saying, "Well, there were rocks there." Are you sure he wasn't like videoing or therming a rock and then misinterpreted? And because the thermal isn't real smooth and it's hard to hold. So you guys weren't running with a tripod, and it clicks every once in a while and moves things around. And I know you were asked this, like, do you think that what you saw was that rock, but you guys were so moving around that you added motion to that? And you've had plenty of time to think about that. Yeah,
I remember when you asked me that back then, and no, because that rock was up because it's almost like a hangover a little bit. It comes up, you come up the road and it kind of goes to the right, and then you get this big berm or that ridge to the right, that berm that goes up, and there's a boulder planted kind of inside the hillside a little bit and has some overgrowth. But what I saw was sitting below that. It was like hugging that right side of that road, trying to not to be seen. That boulder was up high. This thing was down lower.
Right. That boulder was close to the edge of the uplift on the right side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a big difference.
This was definitely sitting on the road and hugging that right side And because I remember that area, I mean, it looked like a good area to go up that berm and go off into the bushes. Yeah.
Yeah. Because right behind that berm, it dropped off pretty steep, went down the hill.
Yeah. I mean, but a creature that size, I mean, that would probably be a no-brainer for it to get up there.
Yeah. Here's another question for you. I know sometimes people ask this because you always hear people use the therms, and they ask them, "Why did you walk towards it?" Because you have this road, it's safe, it's dark, it's still pretty safe. You can still see it, and therm work really well in the dark. And why didn't you guys walk towards it?
It's kind of funny you asked that question, because I for people that don't do research or have never encountered these I call them forest giants, it's pretty intimidating. People, I see that, I've seen that on YouTube, I've seen comments. Why didn't you just, people go, why didn't you just go? You saw it, why didn't you just go towards it? Your mind doesn't tell you to do that. It's a cautionary thing that kicks in. And my thing is, I'm always about safety,
right?
Especially during my expeditions. I don't want anybody getting hurt. And the thing I can tell you is that when you're dealing with any kind of an animal, whether it's deer or bear or mountain lion or dogs or whatever, everything has its own attitude, right? Temperament. Mm-hmm. Especially, but if you're out there in the forest or you're out there and this is not your home, this is not your background. You're basically just a guest there. You're seeing something and engaging something. And like I said, it could be any animal, but your first instinct is not to walk towards it because you don't know how it's going to act. Now, seeing something of that size, it was great. But there's a side inside you that says, whoa, wait, I don't want to encroach on that. Now, I've experienced that years later. You just don't go running up on something like that. You don't. There's that feeling inside thinking, hey, if I go running up on this thing, I could get hurt. I don't know how it's going to act. Is it going to charge towards me? Especially when something that is that big. And if it has what we think, that intelligence, if it feels threatened, what's it going to do? It's going to posture. It's going to defend itself. I don't want to put, plus I don't, and I tell people this, I don't go and running up on it. Now, there's ways of getting closer, but going running up on it and going, hey, I'm here, up in its face, that's not the way to go about it. You don't do that. You're going to piss it off. And the show's going to be completely over because they can move a hell of a lot faster than we can. I've seen them run. And it might take us or our group or you running up as you're trying to intimidate it, or they could get scared and they can go away, and then your expedition or your research, it's over. They'll get out. So those are the kind of things that go through my mind, and I tell people that. But the first, let me get back to this. The first thing is that you got to be safe. I don't care, and I've seen this, and you've seen it. The videos of people seeing bears in Yellowstone or buffalo, and you always get that idiot that wants to get out of the car and walk right up on it. You don't do that. That animal is going to hurt you or could kill you, right? And they don't, here it is. And we've seen that. We've seen a buffalo on one video chase a guy, and, it's a mess. You don't, now we're dealing with something with 5 fingers and 5 toes and has an intelligence. I won't go running up on something like that. Now, if we're going to have, on what we've had something hang out, we're watching it through a thermal camera, we can move gently forward and try to get as close as we can. But in my experience, they usually don't let you get that close. And I think that evening, if we all would have been a gang of 6 of us, just go running up there, that thing would have bounced, taken off, never would have seen it ever again. But, and I know this is hard for people to fathom, but you're dealing with something that has an intelligence. And if they take you as a threat, they're not going to come around, or you're an annoyance, or, hey, and I think of this, if they see you coming and you've already ran up on them once, they're going to steer clear of you, and they're not going to let you see them. And I think that would happen. So, and I tell people, especially when you're in a research area or you've been working in an area, which I do and a group of us do, and I have some great people I work with, a a friend of mine, Mike Poole, he's one of my assistants on the expeditions, Ed Szynski. I worked with a really great friend of mine, Randy Edwards. You know, when we're working in an area for so many years, you have to acclimate yourself to what's around you. You have to get used to what is there, and you have to respect that. These creatures, and I tell people, they're always watching you. If you're in an area that they're in, they're always watching. I do believe that they have sentries out during the day. They have to sleep. They live in family groups. So what it is, they see you coming much way before, you see them. It's their backyard. It's their home. They know where every tree is. They know where every rock is. They know every escape route. And I tell people they're always probably six steps ahead of you. They always have an ingress and egress route to get in and get out. So with that, when we're working in an area and we do have our experiences, that's one thing we don't do. We don't go running up. We might try to inch, get a couple feet closer, observe it through the thermo camera, move forward, but it all depends on that situation. It's very fluid. We've had things thrown at us. So we take that, hey, let's back off. Let's go, hey, show's over for tonight. Let's give it space. It's a respect thing. So, and we have done that, and it has worked out for us when we have gone back and they have what I call the show, or they have been vocal, or, they do tree knocks, or they have shown themselves. So that has worked out. This is when you've been working in an area for a long time.
Right.
So.
And some people don't have that return trip planned up. They're out there to have this experience, but they don't think about, well, your great experience might be the end of experience for a lot of people, or your great experience might be the one that gets you in trouble.
Right.
Because, being in law enforcement where, you go to approach a suspect, you don't go charging at the suspect because you don't know what weapons they have, or you got to find out more about what's going on. So most people don't understand. It's really easy to sit back, like watching the television, and tell everybody what to do. Like, I don't know, Wheel of Fortune, they spin the thing and then you get the letters and you got phrases, and then I'm there. I know the answers to these.
Right.
I can do it. How come they don't get it? Well, it's just like me at the dojo where we all recite the ethics. I can sit there watching everybody else lead the group and recite the ethics while we repeat what they say. When it's my turn, I got to take out my cheat sheet because my brain just shuts off, and it's totally different. So a lot of people say what they do, but they I guess experience will tell. It's the more you learn, the more you know, the more you know. The hard is answering questions.
Now you saying that, I mean, like I said, a lot of my law enforcement background, it does kick in. It's like you don't go running up on a suspect. You don't know what they have. You don't have anything in their waistband. You don't know if they're going to pull something out, which we've seen on these videos, right? Cops go up their front door, boom, they're blasted, right? So you don't know. So I think a lot of that, but my main concern is always safety. And, especially when you're in a group of people and you're on an expedition, or even when we're doing our own research, it's all about safety out there. And that's, I really, really preach that. You got to be safe. Now, we're just not dealing with Bigfoots. We're dealing with other things out there at night. Men are, you know how it is. It's pitch black. You don't know where you're at. You're in a different area, or you're in an area you've seen during the day, but everything basically looks a hell of a lot different at night sometimes, especially on trails. And so safety is paramount. So, and I think that backs up to that background of what I have and what you have, is that, hey, you're just not going to arbitrarily go running up on something. And I tell people that. And I laugh when I read that. God, you had it on thermal. Why didn't you just run up on it? Okay, when you get in that situation, we'll see I would have done that. Okay, we'll see. We'll see you going running up on something you don't know what a hell of a lot about. And I remind people, we don't know anything about their biology. We don't know anything about their morphology, right? They can make their eyes glow. What else can they? Don't know. I don't. I've only seen the eyes, and I've seen bodies, and I've seen how fast they run. I don't know what else they. I imagine their strength is probably off the wall.
Yeah, you weigh so much weight, you're carrying yourself around, you get strong.
Yeah. So, these are the things, we theorize about, and think about. And I tell people, I don't know really anything about their biology. So I'm not going to go running up on something when I don't know really much about it.
Well, good. I got more stuff on you. So you had your first expedition. You got hooked.
Yeah.
Now, you've eventually become a member of the BFRO.
Yes. So I became a member of the BFRO and started doing investigations. So back in 2012, and I've been doing that ever since. And then I was attending expeditions continually throughout the years. And then in 2016, I took the reins over for the California area, BFRO, and I'm only leader and organizer for the California expeditions now since 2016.
Yeah. I'm kind of anal retentive about keeping notes, and I know you are too. How many expeditions have you been leading so far since you took the blue pill?
Well, this year will mark what, 7 expeditions.
Wow.
So 7, not, those are 7 BFRO expeditions, not including,
Yes.
the groups we've done on our own. But as organizing and leading, this year will be the 7th. 7th in July. BFRO.
Yeah, I think I want to say in 2016 you invited me along, my son and I, and we joined you in the Sequoia State Forest or something.
Yeah, we were up there in the Sierra National Forest and the Sequoias and all that back there, south the south area of Kings Canyon Sequoia National Park. Yeah.
My son and I really enjoyed that. We got a lot of picture stuff in. We got to go out at night, have some thunderstorms to deal with at night.
Yeah.
And I'm going through a bunch of other archival stuff, and I found that interview I did with you, the one that I interviewed a couple people there around the campfire. Bill Brewer did his really cool animal sounds talk, and I kind of recorded that and recorded a whole bunch of stuff. And and I remember the interview, and I just stumbled upon it. And I was going through part of it yesterday, kind of reading through it. I'm like, oh, well, I guess I'll have to watch it later because I had lots of stuff going on. So,
on that expedition, we didn't have much going, but just to get back to that first expedition, you were there, but you were on a different group that night. But we had gone out to a trail, and Mike Poole, who assists me today, that was his very first expedition. And that was the very first time we were on a trail. He saw a bipedal figure run across the road in front of him. And that blew his mind. And we had those thunderstorms rolling in that.
Yeah.
And that was in an area that we found bedding in an area. We were going to an area that Mike and another gentleman named Tim Carson had found earlier, 4 beds in one area. And that's where we were heading back to. That was a very interesting evening because we did see something underneath a down log in the storm there, and it was in a fetal position. I thought it was a bear. Remember what you talked about earlier? Did you ever second guess yourself? Did you ever think back and second guess? And maybe that's an incident where I've second guessed myself. What I was looking at, I thought it was a bear. It was not a bear. It was not a bear. It looked too much like a person in a fetal position, but covered in hair. Now,
yeah, I remember.
Remember that? I can still to this day, we had a storm moving in. It was dark. It was rumbling in the distance. The thunder, it was just thundering, flashes of lightning, and we had that wind blowing through the trees. Mike had headed off in front of me, but I always look safety, right? I'm thinking about safety. The root system, and I looked down, and I had these ladies that were on the expedition with me. And I was shining my headlamp in there, and I had my red headlamp. She was on the other side of me, and she says, "There's an auburn eye looking up at you." And she saw that through a red headlamp. It was auburn. She said, "I thought it was a bear. Here it is, safety. Hey, let's all get out of here." We came up on a bear trying to get cover or whatnot. To this day, I think back on that. I was thinking bear, safety, and now I think back, look at the body. That's something I've second guessed myself.
Well, and you will continue to second guess yourself. We're our worst critics.
We are. And what really changed my mind, because on the way out of that trail, we got followed out. And when we got to the parking area, it was not a parking area, it was a logging area. We had some people back at the parking area, a gal named Kathy. She did her famous scream. And right after that, the ridge above us, we got a response, a loud, roaring, screaming, guttural response out of that. And we could hear footsteps when we were coming out of the trail. And like I said, when we got back, she did that. We got a response right away. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to talk about the eye shine aspect of it. That always comes up a lot because whether it's shining, reflecting, or whether it's generating its own color.
Right. So I get that question a lot, and I try to explain people the difference between eye shine and eye glow. I don't call it eye shine. I see that on a lot of the shows. The current show, Expedition Bigfoot, they call it eye shine. I don't. I call it eye glow. There's a difference. You and I driving down the road on a highway through a forest area, our headlights beam up ahead, and you see deer on the side of the road or crossing their eye. It takes an outside source to hit their eyes to reflect that eye shine, meaning their eyes aren't just glowing on themselves to create that light, that reflection, right? The greenish, kind of yellowish light. That's eye shine to me. I tell people, Bigfoots, when you see them, and I've had this experience, eye glow is that you can generate your own eyes to actually glow. And what the color I've seen always is red. It looks like your red headlamps we use at night. That's what they look at, but more like an almond shape, like an eyeball, and they blink. That's eye glow. And that gets me back to, we don't know anything about their biology. And just not myself. Mike has seen it. Randy's seen it. Ed, my other sensei, people in my group have seen this. What's fascinating is that Ed has seen neon green and a blink. He's seen neon green. I've never seen that. I've heard of it, but that's eye glow. It's when something can generate their own part of the body, say the eyeballs, to emit that light on its own. That's eye glow versus eye shine.
How in the world does an animal pull that off?
Well, so I've done some study on that. So we know down like in the deepest part of the ocean, we have fish and other life down there that can generate their own light, right? We have, I got the name of the fish. It has almost like a tentacle on top of its head. And it's like a light bulb that hangs off.
I want to say lanternfish, but I could be wrong.
Like lantern, but it generates its own light source, maybe to maneuver at those depths to see. It's very dark down there. We know there's fireflies, right? Or glow bugs, they can generate. So there's something within their body, their morphology, that biology in there that they can create their own light source. I think that's what Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it, I think they have that ability to do the same thing. Maybe they use it for night vision of some sort, right? But I tell you one thing, they can turn it on and they can turn it off. They can stand there and stare at you without it on, and they can stare at you, and they can show themselves. But to me, it's a very bright red light. It's not a dull light. And it blows you away when you see that. But we had a gentleman who still attends, a guy named Dave Chandler. He attended back in 2020, and him and I were just having this discussion the other day. He had his first encounter, a camp visitation at our camp. He was sleeping in his truck. He had one come right up to his driver window, and he says it was so close, and he goes, it was emitting that red glowing light from its eyeball, but it was so close. He goes, you could see the inside of the eye, like the iris and all that.
Yeah,
you could see the eye behind that glow. And he says that is stuck in his head. He goes, that's how close it got to his driver window as he was looking. So he says, so I find that fascinating, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong on that depiction of that or description. But he said that eye was so close and was so close up to his window, he could see the actual eyeball. That was pretty cool.
That's a little too close.
He was a little bit on the fence. This was his first year attending. After that, and his truck got shook. He set off his alarm. He tried to wake all of us up. It scared him. It scared him a lot. But after that, he says he was no holds barred. He knew they exist.
Does that gentleman still go out, or is he done?
Oh yeah, no, he came. He attends every year. Attended last year. He'll attend this year. Dave's a friend of mine now, and he's learning. He's really into it. He's retired out of the U.S. Navy, and thank God for our veterans, right? Serving in this great country. Thank you for his service. And he's hooked. But he goes out with our group, and he's right up there in your age. I'm not saying you're old, but he's retired like you, and he just he's all in it. But what it is, he's not fanatical about it. He looks at everything like from our perspective. He tries to look at all the angles, and that's what I try to teach people. Make sure you debunk. Make sure you look at these things first. Anyway, getting back to the original thing about the eye glow and eye shine, that's what I tell people about the difference on eye shine and eye glow. Now, I think when they say eye shine, they mean eye glow, but they're just two different things.
Well, I agree. There is a big difference because I think a few years ago, I deciphered the difference between it. When it glows, it's generating its own source. When it shines, it's reflecting back what is shined back to it. So there's a big difference. And you're right. People get those mixed up.